Hey everyone, an exciting day here at Judicial Watch. I'm Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with a special book launch event with you, my dear viewers, here on social media. I'll be talking about my new book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack on America. Oh, there it is right here. And it is available right now everywhere fine books are sold. Most especially judicialwatchbook.com. You can select not only a special signed edition from me personally, but obviously buy the book in virtually every other store you want on our judicialwatchbook.com website. Again, it's Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative book on the left's attack on America. This is our fourth book documenting the destruction and threats of the rule of law, the threats to our republic by corrupt politicians and the left specifically. And most recently, we've had this leftist assault on America that I think bears ferreting out, which we try to do in this new book. And what I'm going to do in this special presentation is go through the book chapter by chapter and talk about some of the current issues as it relates to the book and tell you generally what we talk about in the book. And secondly, I'm going to take questions from you. So if you have a question on the current crisis, and I mean anything related to the current crisis, the border, election integrity, censorship, you name it, the lawfare against Trump, write them down, type them out, put them up online. Our staff will be going through the various social media platforms and pulling and culling them for me, and hopefully I'll be able to get to many of your questions in this format. Again, the new book is Rights and Freedoms in Peril. I encourage you to get it because not only is it educational and I think necessary reading, especially before the election. It's not here to convince you to vote for or against someone. It's here to educate you not only on the issues that you have to contend with as you consider who to vote for, so it's educational in that regard, but it also educates you about the election process, which is a key part of this book about the threats to election integrity we're facing from the left. But the book highlights the various threats to our republic. And, you know, what we should understand is, as I discuss, the left is focused on essentially destroying all the institutions that protect your rights and liberties. Elections, the courts, the Constitution, the rule of law, you know, the sorts of protections that we rely on in order to ensure that our rights and liberties are preserved. And in issue after issue, we've had our liberties curtailed or attempts to curtail them, sometimes successful, sometimes not. And our elections gummed up, our elections threatened in terms of having elections that we can have confidence in, that are free and fair, or a process that's been changed in our elections that's undermined confidence in the election system, which is as threatening as no elections at all in some respects. So as the book goes through each of these topics, they not only give you what my take is and what Judicial Watch's take is on these issues, but it's not just me yelling about it in a book. It's me using documents uncovered by Judicial Watch, uncovered by congressional investigators, uncovered by other investigations to describe and document the issues at hand. So the receipts are in the book on the threat to the constitutional republic. So I'm going to go through chapter by chapter and kind of generally talk about the issues, and I'll get to your questions as I go through. And the first one is the planned chaos at the border. And this chapter documents the purposeful decisions by the Biden administration in the beginning, meaning as soon as he got into office, to retreat from all of the rules and regulations that either were enforced by Trump in the sense that the law is already on the book and he was on the books and he was just enforcing them, or regulations implementing the laws in a way to address the crisis that he faced initially in his administration with border surges. And the book also documents the role of sanctuary cities in enabling illegal aliens not only to continue to reside illegally in the United States, but protecting the criminals amongst them from being held accountable or being deported, as they should have been, for the public safety. We also document in the book, and Judicial Watch, I know it's been in the news more recently because of the numbers being released. We've long understood that one of the moral outrages related to the border invasion is the child trafficking associated with it. And we have documented time and time again how U.S. entities, through government funding, benefit from basically managing child trafficking operations that are essentially enabled by the United States government's open border system as set forth by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, this book was written before the coup, right? But in many ways, if you read this book, a coup would never have surprised you, right? When the left wants to jail their political opponents, when the left wants to censor tens, hundreds of millions of Americans, when the left wants to force you to engage in, to be vaccinated or lie to you about matters of health, why would it surprise you that there be a coup removing a candidate from the presidency and negating and essentially nullifying the votes of 15 million voters in my view, an unlawful way? So if you want to understand how we're here right now and where we might go and where we should go, you want to get this new book. Okay, so I'm already getting questions. Signe Tuplan on YouTube, can you explain more about the dead and other voters cleared from voter rolls? And I have another question here. The need for ID for cigarettes, but not for legitimate voting, and more about cleaning voter rolls. So I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but that's, I know, an important issue because we're running up against that issue right now as Judicial Watch is in court on this very topic. The next chapter in the book is the lawfare targeting Trump. And it started almost, by now all accounts, even before he announced his presidency. It continued through the campaign, the first campaign, 2016. Then it transformed or metastasized into sedition after he was elected. And even after he left, they continued the lawfare because they were worried he was going to come back, and they wanted to distract from not only their criminality, like the Obama-Clinton gang's criminality, but Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the Biden family criminality. So we've had this unprecedented abuse by Democratic Party politicians, prosecutors, and friendly judges to try to jail their political opponents based on pretext, fake charges, and sham arguments. Much of the argument used to target Trump is designed to scare Americans from disputing the election. Now he's being there right now, as we speak. They just filed a new charge, not as we speak, but recently Jack Smith restated after being brushed back by the Supreme Court or humiliated by the Supreme Court, tried to come up with a new set of charges that fit with the Supreme Court's ruling that President Trump had immunity related to his conduct as president, largely. And they've largely ignored that ruling, and they're still trying to jail him for daring to dispute the election. Now, is that charge about 2020, or is it a charge to stop people from disputing the election in 2024? And more directly, from rigging the election against Trump. As I've noted before, the election is compromised already. It's been compromised by this lawfare. And the only question remaining is the result going to be such that the American people will have confidence that the election was fairly conducted in the full sense of the word, that you didn't have government intervention designed to achieve a certain result, and did that government intervention prove decisive? That's the question. It's not a question of whether it was compromised, it's whether the compromise will work one way or the other. So we cover it all comprehensively in this book, the Lawfare. And, I detail in some measure how the Lawfare targeted yours truly, targeted Judicial Watch. I was hauled before the grand jury that Jack Smith had impaneled here in Washington, D.C., and I was harassed for hours on Judicial Watch's First Amendment protected activity. Is essentially a debating club about elections and Trump documents and all the rest. Still getting some questions on Twitter. Why is no one getting charged with all the crimes these officials are being committed? How can the FBI do illegal investigations yet nothing happens? That's a great question. It's even worse than that. They get fully funded to do this abuse by the Republican-controlled House. I mean, I've highlighted all these issues repeatedly in the past about how Republicans have been fully funding the lawfare against Trump, and I don't understand it. They say, we don't want to shut the government down. I think it's worth shutting the government down to stop the destruction of our republic. Because I do think this is, when you start jailing your political enemies on pretext, that could be potentially the end of America. So I think something dramatic needs to be done to stop it. And the current, the way the Republicans currently think about this is they don't want to do those dramatic steps. Now, if Trump is elected, what is he going to do? I don't know. If I were him, I know what I would do. One thing I would demand as president would be a serious criminal investigation into the abuse of power, essentially the effort to deprive him of his civil rights under color of law, which is a crime. That should be at least part of the criminal investigation. So let's see what the next chapter is. I was joking. I don't like. I'm doing interviews for the book. Again, the book is Rights and Freedoms in Peril. I guess it's all over your screen so you can see it. But it's available now, so please get it. It's a great way to support Judicial Watch and advance the cause of freedom. I was saying I don't like doing the book interviews because I just get angry all the time. Because a lot of this stuff is outrageous, right? But, of course I get angry. It's righteous anger. But you should know, though, it's not just getting angry. It's about doing something, using this anger, using our upsettedness, and channeling it to an effective approach, which in our view is using the laws available to us as American citizens, whether it be the First Amendment, whether it be FOIA or other laws, to address the issues that we are upset about. And there's nothing wrong with being upset about issues. I mean, moral outrage is a significant motivating force. It gets you going. And the question is, what is it you can do to address the issues that you're upset about? And I think Judicial Watch is the way for Americans to address the crushing issue of government corruption and abuse. So what's the next chapter? Chapter 3 is, let me go to the beginning. That'll be easy. Diversity scams and party spoils. Again, I'm taking questions, so if you have questions about what I'm talking about, I'll try to get to a few as I talk, and after I'm done talking about the book, or about the issues and the current crisis, I'll try to bring in your questions and get through them all. The left has really gone nuts when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's just another word for legalized racial discrimination. And even calling it legalized is probably incorrect because we don't think it's legal. Indeed, Judicial Watch, as the book recounts, has become the nation's civil rights leader in ensuring that our civil rights laws prohibiting racial discrimination, that the 14th Amendment, you know the 14th Amendment, you know what it says? Equal protection under the law. You can't be denied equal protection under the law on account of your race. And the left proposes to do that. In Evanston, Illinois, they have reparations where they're giving money to people because they're black. Whites are prohibited. Minneapolis, they have a public school teachers contract that, when it comes to layoffs, skips over teachers who are black, and they are protected from layoffs, and it goes to a white person, and they're fired or laid off. Outrageous racism. The left has abandoned protection of the civil rights of you and me and everyone else. And right now, certain groups seem to benefit from it. But when you say those rules don't matter, those groups lose their protections as well. Because it's what's good for the goose becomes good for the gander. And I oppose denying people equal protection of the law based on their race, no matter their color. The left embraces it. So this is at heart what's at issue. So we talk about those lawsuits. We talk about our investigations into how this is creeping into, not creeping into, slamming into our military. At West Point, at the Air Force Academy, at the Naval Academy. It is the central organizing principle for the Biden-Harris administration, and our book exposes it all. I mean, you can even see in the campaign, I've been tweeting today, Kamala Harris was announcing some sort of racist program to give, because black men aren't voting for Kamala Harris or aren't showing significant enough support for her, so they say we're going to give money to black men on account of their race. I mean, that's illegal. They don't care. There's this kind of a brazen embrace of law breaking when it comes to laws against discrimination. It's really incredible. I told you I get angry when I start talking about this. It's outrageous. And no sensible American supports it. This is probably the most important. The next chapter is the COVID cover-up. I would submit this is the most important book you'll read about the COVID scandals. It was Judicial Watch who uncovered the lies and cover-ups and secrets about the funding of gain-of-function in China, about how Fauci and his agency compromised the health of the American people by supporting gain-of-function in China and then covering it all up. And the only reason we know about what went on there is largely because, most significantly because of Judicial Watch's litigation. There's no one who's uncovered more about what was going on with gain-of-function than Judicial Watch. And we disclose it all in the chapter. And I tell you, this chapter, they don't want you to read. Dr. Fauci doesn't want you to read this chapter. It discloses about how COVID and gain-of-function are likely tied, how they were worried about gain-of-function yet did nothing about it, how gain-of-function is going on here in the United States. What is gain-of-function? It's taking a virus and making it more dangerous for humans. Simply put. I mean, this chapter alone is worth the price of admission. And when you think about what COVID was done, how COVID was misused in terms of curtailing your rights and freedoms, messing with our elections, placing your health at risk, this book is for you. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of these. I'm going to get through your questions in a little bit. An election like any other. So this is an important chapter. And again, I tell you, this book is essential reading before the election. It is essential reading, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. Why? Because we not only explain what happened in 2020, but what the threats are to free and fair elections in 2024 and beyond, and what can be done about it. And the number one thing that Judicial Watch has been doing is suing states to enforce the federal law that requires them to clean up the rolls. And we've been doing it successfully. Our lawsuits, our litigation, our threats, our pressure has led to 4 million names being cleaned up just in the last year or two. We're currently in litigation in Illinois and California to clean up millions more. We're about to sue in Oregon. We have lawsuits also in Mississippi and Illinois to stop the counting of ballots that arrive after Election Day. We have federal law. It sets an election day. One of the problems we had in 2020 was that was completely ignored, in my view. Counting ballots that arrive after Election Day is, according to our analysis and our willingness to go to court, shows you our analysis is concerning enough that we got to sue over it. So it's not only unlawful, as we allege, it encourages voter fraud, quite obviously, and undermines confidence in the election. Oh, you don't know who won on Election Day? You're waiting a few days to count ballots still coming in? Who are you fooling? And we've been doing this alone. One or two other groups that do this type of work. Judicial Watch has been doing the most in terms of litigation. In fact, the Justice Department, when I talk about cleaning up the rolls, the Justice Department is supposed to be enforcing that law too. We've been doing it with zero help, obviously, from the Biden gang. In fact, they just most recently said they want to sue Virginia, or they literally did sue Virginia, because they want to take non-citizens off the rolls. That's their idea. So we're suing to make sure the rolls are clean. They are literally suing to make sure that illegal aliens and aliens who are here legally can more likely illegally vote in our elections. And tying in the chapters on the illegal immigration issue, tying in the chapter on election integrity, the two are linked. Why? Because the very presence of millions of illegal aliens distorts our political structure and the powers of the respective parties. What do I mean? When the census occurs in 2030, those, unless they've been deported, those aliens will be counted who crossed the border. The invaders will be counted. And where they live, those states will get the benefit of having a larger population, more representation in Congress, not of citizens, but of non-citizens, and more electoral college votes for the electoral college. And studies have shown in the prior census that it resulted in significant number of seats that Democrats otherwise would not have had. And the left is set to benefit by 25 congressional seats as a result of this invasion. Now, places like Florida and Texas, they may benefit on them as well, but not enough to make up for the benefits to New York and Illinois and California and places like that. And of course, the fact is there's no strong law other than you're not supposed to do it. There's no way, there's no ability of the states, more or less, to make sure that only citizens are voting in our elections. So this book describes that issue as well. And the left doesn't want to do any of that. They don't want voter ID. They don't want citizenship verification. They don't want the rolls to be cleaned up. And that's what we're going to be running into in 2024 again. As someone says, Chris Wilcox, you need ID for cigarettes, but not for legitimate voting. I mean, as best I can tell, there are only, let's say, 10, 11 states that have strong voter ID. I think 15 states have, I'm just going on memory on these numbers, so don't fact check me, fact checkers. I think it's 15 or so states that have no voter ID. And the rest of the states have a variation, some voter ID or voter ID, but the voter ID laws need to be strengthened. I mean, you show up, you can give them a utility bill, and you get the vote. That, to me, is not a sufficient voter ID. But it's better than nothing, I suppose, right? So places like Pennsylvania have no voter ID, Illinois has no voter ID, California has no voter ID, New York has no voter ID. Here in Washington, D.C., we have no voter ID. I just got a ballot in the mail in Washington, D.C. At least it looks like if I return it, they'll supposedly check my signature. Not terribly reassuring. No voter ID, though, required to vote. It's a few states have voter ID to vote via the mail, but it's too rare. And the other problem with vote by mail, in my view, is that there's no way to check against voter intimidation. Because you don't know. It's unsupervised voting. You don't know what's going on. People should vote in person on Election Day with voter ID, with citizenship verification. Yes, I know there are people fighting abroad, and that's the exception that proves the rule. To highlight some extreme circumstance where someone might be able to vote absentee doesn't justify the mass mailing of ballots, which is what we have in too many states. So I get into that in this book. Someone asked, can I explain about cleaning the voter rolls? I think I explained it. Is it legal for Gavin Newsom to make it illegal for ID to be asked if the illegals try to vote? Can he do that? Now, that's an interesting question. Maybe, maybe not. Does someone have the right to individual voting officials in California have the right to ask for ID from someone that they know or suspect quite in good faith to be non-citizens? I don't know. I mean, the challenge with that is, what is the basis for believing someone's a non-citizen if voter ID is not required of anyone in California? Some have suggested that we have a national law that requires voter ID, and I would submit that's not going to work unless you have citizenship verification, because what happens is, this is what happens. Let's say I'm Tom Fitton from Ireland, and I've got a work visa, and I'm here, or even better, I have a green card. So I'm here permanently. I'm a permanent non-citizen resident. Eventually I can become a citizen. Until then, though, I'm not a citizen. So, in this glorious country, I'm able to work and, largely operate like many other, like Americans. And I go and I get my driver's license. And I miss, do I want to vote? And I'm like, I didn't read it closely enough, and I check off. Oh, this is a great country. I get to vote too. And I don't realize that as a non-citizen, I'm not supposed to vote. Or I think, I pay so many taxes, I'm going to vote, and I'm going to check, and I'm going to make believe I'm a citizen, no matter how you slice it. And let's say I live in a state like Georgia or Florida or Alabama where they've got voter ID requirements. I'm already registered to vote. They have to take my word for it. What I may have said wrongly, I'm a citizen, but no one's asked to verify that, so no one's going to know, in theory, or it's terribly difficult for them to find out. And then I show up and I have the ID necessary to vote. Once you're registered to vote as a non-citizen, voter ID is not necessarily going to stop you from then voting. So that's why voter ID is necessary but not sufficient. So that's a long way of putting it. Dana from Facebook says, no illegals should be allowed to vote. I agree. I don't think non-citizens should vote in our elections. I don't believe that's controversial for pretty much anyone other than the communist left that wants to destroy America by eliminating the concept of censorship. The concept of citizenship. The Big Lie. So that's a great chapter as well. And, the big lie is being told that 2020 was completely normal and to move along. The big lie is the falsehoods about January 6th. The big lie is the censorship associated with policing pushback against all of those falsehoods. So this chapter gives you chapter and verse of everything that they've been trying to suppress on January 6th, on the prior election, etc. We talk a little bit about the Hunter laptop and things like that. And we've never faced before a significant threat as we have now against our core freedoms under the First Amendment. It's not only freedom of conscience, it's like the right to think differently. I mean, that's kind of what the First Amendment's about. It's freedom of speech. It's freedom of association. Trying to criminalize a political party. It's the right to petition your government, which they're trying to jail countless Americans for related to the election controversy. Oh, you want to petition your government and hold the government accountable over misconduct in the elections? Well, we're going to jail you for doing that. That's what the left has decided to do. An important chapter. And then we got a catch-all chapter that talks about how Biden let his friends in China send the balloon over, about how the Secret Service has been destroyed by not only DEI, but the Joe Biden letting his dogs attack the Secret Service. I mean, to read a detail of Biden letting his dog attack 25 Secret Service agents will help explain why it is the Secret Service is dysfunctional and why it is maybe Trump was nearly killed 2 or 3 times, depending on what you believe about what happened in Coachella last week. So this is a great book. I think I've gone through all the chapters. Let me make sure. And then our conclusion is just, it's to me, it highlights the issues and it motivates you the way forward. So I can't tell you how important this book is to you as a citizen. This is the book patriots need. This is the book America needs. This is the book, in my view, that if read carefully and followed through, and if people understand the threats at issue, that could save the country. Because I believe our republic is tottering. So I encourage you to get the book. It's available beginning today, all over the internet, judicialwatchbook.com. So let me go to some of your questions here. Is there complete videos of January 6th? Well, no. Some of the videos Congress hadn't released any of the videos, or they've only been released selectively until Judicial Watch started suing. until Republicans took over in Congress and we pressed them, and they finally released all the footage. I think almost all the footage. There's still footage that the D.C. police are hiding. I don't know what footage the FBI has. So we don't have all the footage yet. And we are in court right now over the D.C. police hiding security footage or the footage of officers that were present on January 6th. From TH on YouTube, it seems there is more pushback on DEI. Yes, I would agree, he says. Would you agree? That I would agree. Part of it is because Judicial Watch has been successful in court. Part of which because the Supreme Court has pushed back on DEI. The court, you know, the courts can be leaders if they're doing their job well in educating Americans about what is constitutional and what isn't. And if it's persuasive to most Americans, sometimes the court gets more political than legal in their rulings. But if the rulings are significant and based on a generally recognized understanding of what the Constitution and the law requires, Supreme Court decisions can be powerful points for guiding the public in terms of their understanding of the law and policy. And I think that's one of the reasons DEI is disappearing in some or retreating in some areas. But they're never going to stop. I mean, first of all, DEI is part of a communist plot to destroy the country. It's Marxism, plain and simple. So they're never really going to stop. They're going to think of other ways to do it or disguise it. And plus, there are a lot of political benefits to pursuing DEI because it's a vehicle by which the left takes care of its the groups they want voting for them. So it's always going to be a battle. What do I think about trans and women's sports? I think that biological men shouldn't be in women's sports. Or biological men who pretend to be or who are presenting as women, whatever you want to call it, should not be in women's sports. I don't think that's a controversial point. And that is controversial shows kind of the sickness of the cultural Marxism we have here in the United States. Okay, let me see if there are any other questions I'm missing here. It's against the law to ask for ID in how many states? Now, I don't know whether it's against the law to ask for ID in states that don't require voter ID, so I don't want to be I want to be clear on that. I don't want to get too exact like that. But generally speaking, it's about 15 states that don't have voter ID requirements. Now, if you register for the first time, I think you have to show your ID. But once you're registered to vote, all bets are off in many states. So that's the big issue. Okay, any other questions, guys? Okay, so we got a few more. So if you, I encourage you to get this book. Why? Because it's educational, and as a result, I encourage you to get more than one copy. Get some for your spouse, get some for your children and grandchildren, or your brothers and sisters. You know the folks who might like this because they love Judicial Watch. I love Judicial Watch. I know I'm the president of Judicial Watch, so I have reason to love it. But I love it because as a citizen, we do this astonishing amount of work that has such an impact on the future of our country. I'm convinced, for instance, that Trump would be in jail by now if not for Judicial Watch standing fast for the rule of law and against the abuses of him by the Justice Department. I really do. Okay, are any other questions here? I'm looking on the phone. Okay. All right. I'm going to do a 3, 2, 1, guys. Anything else in the back there from our supporters here?
We had 2. Did you get them?
No. Don't we have to be a citizen? No, you don't. Not in certain jurisdictions. Now, you have to be a citizen technically to vote in federal elections. Here in Washington, D.C., some localities, and such as here in Washington, D.C., allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. So, in theory, the Russian ambassador can vote for the mayor of our nation's capital. That's how insane things are. And Congress hasn't done anything to stop it, even though Congress has absolute jurisdiction over our nation's capital under the U.S. Constitution. Okay. Anything else? Why isn't Hillary in jail for the emails? Because her friends in the Obama administration didn't want to charge her, and then weak-kneed Republicans in the Trump Justice Department under Jeff Sessions didn't want to revisit the issue. And not only that, but they defended her email conduct, both in the State Department and in the Justice Department. Imagine Judicial Watch's shock to find that the Trump appointees were defending Hillary's misconduct. And I know the White House probably opposed it, but they didn't care. So that's why Hillary's not in jail. And others for the open border. I think there should be criminal investigations as to those who were involved in trafficking human beings. Now, is Joe Biden immune from such investigations? Maybe. Under the Supreme Court opinion and under the Constitution, maybe, but not her subordinates. Mayorkas and people like that, they're not necessarily immune. I mean, if one person went to jail for some of these crimes, I'd be happy. Or if one person was seriously investigated, I'd be happy. Maybe they're not prosecuted, but there's a serious investigation. I mean, right now, it's Judicial Watch doing the serious investigations. Congress has been a bit more serious, but not nearly serious enough, following our lead. So a lot of this is covered, not all of it, but much of it is covered in this new book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, my new book for Judicial Watch. Help it become a bestseller. Help get the word out. It's essential reading, especially before the election. Go to judicialwatchbook.com, go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, you name it. Purchase it. You won't regret it. And not only will you be educating yourself, but you'll be helping advance Judicial Watch's important mission. Because if Judicial Watch doesn't do it, who will? So with that, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you here again on Judicial Watch's various social media platforms. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.